What time is it? It's time for another Every Other Wednesday.
Thing. That's why. Oh, ladies and gentlemen, welcome to Every Other Wednesday. It is January 25th, 2023, where we get together every other Wednesday to talk about culture issues. We have 4 people part of our Musketeer group. 2 are not with us, being Richard and Jeff, because, well, they're working, fancy boys. And you're stuck with myself, Sanjay. I am based out of Toronto. I'm a speaker and author focusing on leadership and performance. And my padre for this session is
Michael Kerr, and I'm coming to you as typically I am from beautiful Canmore, Alberta, in the spectacular Canadian Rockies, and I speak about inspiring workplace culture, inspiring leadership, and businesses that leverage their humor resources to drive outrageous results. And Sanjay, if you will indulge me, I'm going to put in, because people were asking, last Every Other Wednesday, I'm putting in, because the podcast I referenced downloaded on Monday, so there's your options for listening to it. It was a great conversation with Insights at Work. We had a great, I think it's about a 40-minute conversation about workplace culture and humor and all that good stuff. So please,
40-minute conversation on workplace culture and humor. That sounds very weird. I would never do that.
No, I know. Who would do that? Aren't we going to do that? Aren't we doing that?
Oh, what? But what are we going to do? That is a great, look at that segue. It's almost like we planned it or something.
We almost did. Oh, but wait a minute. The theme days. We got to talk about the theme days.
Oh, what is today?
It's January 25th. It is Robert Burns Day, of course, Irish Coffee Day, opposite day, where you're supposed to do the opposite of what you would normally do all day. So maybe, Sanjay, this is a chance for you to be nice. And
I don't follow.
And it's Library Shelfie Day, where you're supposed to post photos of your favorite books or shelves, library shelves, to celebrate books and reading. So there you go. Hey, and Friday is Fun at Work Day. So everybody remember, Fun at Work Day, Friday, do something fun, do something extra fun. You should be doing something fun every day, but extra fun this Friday. So Sanjay, what are we talking about today?
I don't know.
I don't know. Should we just
we were talking about the difference between
the difference between, yes, a topic that's, when I've written about it several times, done videos on it, and it's generated a whack of feedback, surprisingly to me, actually, how much feedback I've gotten on this topic. And the topic is there a danger of creating too nice a workplace? Is there a danger of being too nice at work? We know Sanjay doesn't have to worry about this, but is there a danger for the rest of us being too nice at work, creating too nice a workplace? And is there a difference between creating what I would call a kind workplace versus a nice workplace?
Okay, so when you first proposed this, I mean, like you said, you were surprised, as was I, that not that, I mean, I get it. I understand why there's a discrepancy and why we need to be careful of it. And obviously we're going to go into that a little deeper. But what surprises me is that you said it's one of the things that gets the most traction and the most responses. Any idea or any clue as to why you think that is? What are your insights on that?
Well, it surprised me too that it resonated with so many people. I got emails, phone calls about it. I got the most comments I've gotten in a long time in various things I posted about it. It just seems to resonate with a lot of people. Some people were expressing how they have in the past felt like they themselves just personally were often too nice in their job, and it cost them. They felt like they were being treated like a doormat. Their self-esteem suffered. They weren't speaking up for what they really needed or wanted. They weren't expressing themselves as best as they could, all because they were trying to be too nice. But then a lot of people too, it definitely struck a chord, this idea of working in an culture on a team where sometimes the boss even is too nice. Like we all want it. On the surface, it seems crazy to think, well, of course we want our boss to be nice. But the challenges that we'll get into, of course, that people raised with me is, yeah, I've had bosses over the years that were just too nice. So they didn't deal with the jerks on our team. They didn't give honest feedback that we really needed to hear, that I needed to hear to grow in my job. Because they were trying to be too nice.
And I think that to Ashley's comment in the chat there, that we should really kind of define what it means to be nice, because a lot of times when we think nice means respectful, or nice means, fair. And that's not necessarily what we're saying here. We're saying nice means you are the shit acceptor, and you are the doormat, and you are the yes ma'am or yes sir, to the point of detriment for yourself personally, possibly for your career, for your organization, for your customers, for everyone. So the idea of, you're saying, like, you want a boss, everyone wants a boss that treats them fairly. And although you think you may want a boss that gives you whatever you want, I promise you, if you have someone like that in the organization, it is not sustainable. Right. It might last for a week, a month, a year, a career, but I promise you, eventually, if someone looks at it and they realize, yeah, we're bleeding resources here, from either a human capital, from a financial capital, from a time capital. But if we are nice to the point of dysfunction, then yeah, that is a big issue.
Right. And I do like the differentiator between being kind and being nice, because to me, I think that works. I think it's not just semantics, but I think, as I've said before, it's not kind always to be overly nice, right? There is a difference. One of the kindest things we can do, and maybe we're talking about compassion here as well, that's certainly important, especially from a leadership point of view, and creating a workplace culture of compassion has never been more important, I think. But sometimes the kindest thing we can do is to be honest with one another and have those difficult, uncomfortable conversations instead of shunting them. Sometimes the kindest thing we can do is to debate ideas in a healthier, passionate way on our team, so we don't suffer from groupthink and come up with lousy decisions, make lousy choices because everyone wants to just get along and be nice.
And not rock the boat. I have a friend years ago was doing his PhD in healthy conflict. And so they were, what they were trying to do, and I was actually part of a bit of the research, where they were trying to get groups to solve problems. And my job was always the plant to try to get healthy dialogue going that was where people are disagreeing, but not disrespectful and cursing and swearing, but to the idea of creating an environment where I can say, hey, Michael, I think you're an idiot, and here's why. And I'm saying it very bluntly, but the idea of being able to contradict or disagree with people and have that environment be safe enough that says, I don't know if I'll necessarily get my way, but my opinion will be heard.
Right.
So to be able to say to your boss, in fact, I had a call this morning with a client, and we were talking about this kind of an idea, and she said, yes, what I tell and I will say that I think to my boss, I think you're wrong in this one, but ultimately it's your money. So I'm trying to equip you with the information. You make the decisions that's best for you.
Right.
And so I was trying to explain to her that fact that she feels that she can do that she can go into her boss's office and say, hey, no, you're wrong, and here's why. And again, in a controlled environment, at the right time, at the right place, with the right language, not just, shoot off your mouth, but in a way that says, here's what I think you're missing. And it doesn't mean he's going to do that, but he's going to listen to her, and then he's going to make his decision.
Right.
On the flip side, I'm working now with this larger organization, and oh my God, I can't roll my eyes back into my head far enough. It's just the complete opposite. I'll give you an example. They were rolling out this new document. They were upgrading their system, and it's still manual. It's very prehistoric in a lot of regards, but they were required to physically write a date. And I was an outsider, so I'm not, I'm like a consultant. And I was like, I put up my hand and I'm like, there's an error on that form. And this was about a month ago. I'm like, there's an error on the form. You haven't put the date in properly. And I pointed out, they're like, oh my goodness, you're right. And so a month later, they just rolled this thing out last week. The error was still there. So I followed up and I said, I pointed it out to you. Why did you guys still, and before they had a sample document, now they printed up 100,000 of them. And I'm like, well, why did you do that? And the response, after I asked enough people, they were all like, we were afraid to tell the guy he was wrong.
Oh, yeah, see, being too nice, I mean, that's also that also ties into other things, right?
Yeah, like
I mean,
too stupid.
People
too nice.
Nobody likes conflict, right? We're that's a whole related topic to this too, right? Is conflict avoidance. And of course, and with your example, Sanjay, right? It's a great reminder. We're not talking about being disrespectful in any way, right? But creating that psychologically safe environment that we talk about here so often, that's so important, so that people can have healthy debates focused on the topics, on the ideas, not on the personalities, not on each other. I want to get to the chat box here because there's some great, thank you, Ashley, for that. Yeah, just like sympathy and empathy, very similar, yet a little different when we talk about the difference between kindness and niceness. And Kim, yes, I love Brené's Brown on that. Unclear is kind, clear is kind. I use that very, very often. And
along the
being
same
honest
lines,
is kind.
Along the same lines, we had a guest few, I don't know, every other Wednesdays ago, and they were talking about one of the mantras from an organization he'd been part of, which was they should say, bad news does not get better with time.
Yeah, that's great. I love
Which is a great, yeah, like sometimes the meanest thing we can do is bite our tongue.
Yeah.
I was having a conversation with a friend of mine years ago, and he was saying this thing about he always strives to be kind and not cruel. And I said, sometimes by being kind, you're actually being cruel. He said, what are you talking about? And he had kids. So I said, you have kids? He said, yeah. He said, if your kids were misbehaving, would you punish them? And he said, well, depending on what it was, but there would be consequences to their action. And I said, from their perspective, would they label you as cruel? Because you grounded them for watching too much TV or whatever it is. And so a lot of this stuff is so subjective and it's so perception based, right? What I think is kind, you may think is cruel.
Right.
In fact, here's a great story I heard last week that I'm gonna now constantly tell over and over again. Two best friends, two besties, Allison and Beth Ann. And Allison and Beth were good friends in high school, except Beth's mom didn't like Allison and Allison's mom didn't like Beth. And here's why. Because when Allison would go to Beth's house, she would open the fridge and help herself to snacks. And
at Allison, my goodness.
Yeah, silly Allison. And so Beth's mom thought, Allison, how rude, she's like violating people's space, blah, 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 blah. And now this is why Allison's mom didn't like Beth, because when Beth would go to Allison's house, she wouldn't go into the fridge, she would wait to be served. And she thought, what a spoiled, rotten brat. She comes to my house and expects me to wait on her. And the irony is both Beth and Allison were both trying to be polite and respectful, right. But from a perception based, they were both being rude. And so that's why I think a really important part of this kind piece is the understanding of what is the baseline, how do we communicate the value? What are the expectations? Because if we're supposed to bite our tongue and we don't bite our tongue, well, that can be considered disrespectful and unkind. But I think the core of what we're trying to say is being honest, even if you're rustling feathers, if it's done in the right way, it usually gets you to your end goal of moving the organization forward, creating a psychologically safe work environment, and creating a healthy workplace culture.
Right, for sure. I love how, oh my God, we've referenced the book title before. I should know this at the top of my head, but a fabulous conversation about Netflix's culture of honest communication and how much they put a premium on honest communication and feedback and make it an expectation that it is your job to give each other feedback. It is your job to give me as your boss feedback. And they have senior leaders demonstrate healthy debates in front of employees to show what a good healthy debate looks like. So there's a lot tied into this, right? I mean, honesty, communication skills, coaching skills, how meetings are facilitated. And so much of this starts at the top, right? Leaders sending the right message, demonstrating this themselves. And I think it can be really challenging if you have a boss that doesn't demonstrate that.
Yeah, I think that you said it earlier, this idea of being able to have the difficult conversations. And that is, again, I don't want to get caught in the semantics of it, but I think that's one of the kindest things you can do. It's not overkind, or I guess using your words, you're saying that is kind, but not no. Nice, but not kind but not nice. Now you're confusing me. But the idea of setting the example, and I think that's, again, you're saying from the top, if we can do that, and in fact, on a smaller scale, where I've seen that, I've seen where a leader plants a challenge with one of his people. So he's doing some presentation, he's doing that, and then all of a sudden he's challenged. And what's so important is how you deal with it. So if he freaks out, and again, this is a plan because they're trying to create the culture to say it is okay to challenge the status quo.
Right.
Right. And again, they're trying to demonstrate this is the way you do it. And then it comes out as part of the debrief. Thank you, Sally, for pointing that out. I hadn't considered that. And I actually would encourage all of you that if you ever see someone doing it, whether it's me or it's Sally or someone else, that we have the environment and the end in mind for everyone as an organization, that we are customer centric, we are environmental centric, whatever the value of the organization is, and look for opportunities to invite and feedback to the peeps that it is okay. And not only is it okay, but as you said earlier, it's part of your job. It's an expectation. And that's the only way we're going to grow.
We want you to challenge ideas. We want you to think. We do pay you to think around here. So let's talk about this then, Sanjay. In a meeting situation, you're with your team, and this idea of actually doing some things. Do you have some tips on how you could actually facilitate, actually inject some healthy conflict into a meeting situation, so that people aren't playing it too safe?
So right there, I gave one, which is you create a plan.
Right.
The other way to it is kind of like the training wheels. Is if you do it in a fun environment, then you can kind of grow it. And escalate sounds bad, but you can grow beyond that. So, for example, if you do something that's either you're having a meeting and then you end the meeting with a silly debate, right? Be it resolved that men are funnier than women. Or
I believe we had this debate.
Exactly. That was a tip of the cap to you. Inside joke. But that way, and then you get people, and I would always pick a topic that's fun and silly, not a really emotionally charged one. Right. And then if you do that, like say you spend 3 minutes at the end of every meeting, every weekly meeting doing that, you can actually escalate the topics up. Right. So you start off completely silly, then it's moderately silly, then it's not that silly, and then we're into semi-serious and then serious. And again, there are different metrics in which you can do it. You can notify people ahead of time, you can throw them on the spot. But if you're putting them on the spot, make sure that it's something that they are comfortable with. We're not trying to throw people under the bus here. But I mean, those are a couple ideas. What about you? Can you think of
and to your point, that's really important. The role of humor and fun and lightness can play in a meeting or just in a workplace culture, right? As somebody once said, humor helps us be disagreeable without, what is the quote? Humor helps us disagree without being disagreeable, right? And creating that lightness is so important. A couple of tips, and I see Rose Adams is with us. She saw this debate we're talking about. Yeah, that was I do. Well, I wasn't debating. I was the moderator.
I know, and you totally threw me under the bus. That's all I got to say.
Did I throw you under the bus?
I don't know. That's what people said. So
yeah, I think so.
I go with them.
By the way, now the song "Cruel to Be Kind" is stuck in my head. Did it not pop into your head earlier?
No, but will you sing it?
I will sing it later. So back to a few tips to inject some healthy, constructive debate into a meeting. I've seen all sorts of different ways that some of my clients do it, that I've done it in the past as a manager. Everything from having a dedicated devil's advocate person who actually, and the position changes around, so people get this different role, and they actually have to take the opposing viewpoint on any idea that is proposed. We've done things like rumor mill sections in meetings where people, in a fun, safe way, bring up rumors that they heard. So it makes it just more uncomfortable for them to bring up things. Doing the fun debate idea, like you said, having fun scorecards, fun, the whiteboards that I use. You can have all sorts of fun with this to just get people more engaged in healthier discussion. I think a very simple thing we can do too to have more honest conversations in our meetings is that we know as soon as a meeting has even 6 or 7 people in it, chances are there are 1 or 2 people who, because they're introverts, they're very shy, they lack the confidence, they aren't going to speak up necessarily. So splitting, when you have great topics, great conversations, splitting people into micro pods, 2 to 3 people each, so that people are far more willing to speak truthfully, to have a healthier conversation, and then bring it back to the bigger group. So there's all sorts of things.
Along the same lines, I think that just like being blunt, going, hey, we want to increase the healthy conflict. Like, I mean, just explain it. You don't have to trick people into it. Just kind of going,
No, yeah.
we believe, or we've read research, or do we understand, whatever language you want to use, kind of going, we want people to have healthy conflict. What does healthy conflict look like? And define it. The other thing too is eliciting feedback, sort of mandatory feedback, in the sense of, hey, we're going to go around the room. I want everyone to say the thing that's bothering them most about the workplace. What bothers you most about customers? What's one idea you have around generating increased sales, or whatever it is. And if you're doing that, which I think is good to a certain degree, not all the time, because sometimes people, you know, their soul gets sucked out of them if you're doing it too often. I also think that if you're doing something like that, it's really important to give people the right to pass, so that they don't feel that they have to, and they're, you know, they're getting all nervous and, oh, it's my turn next, what am I going to say? But there's also an art to doing that, in that the order in which you pick on people, I think, is really, really important. Because if you pick the 3 most keen people in the meeting and they give you a half-an-hour response, then to the group think portion of our talk from earlier, everyone's going to feel obliged to do a 30-minute response. And if you want something quick and punchy, and even if you know the first 3 people are going to give a 3-second response, you go 1, 2, 3, then all of a sudden they've set the table for everyone else. So I think that it's important to bring in people, but I also, if you have 10 minutes for the meeting and there is someone who's really supercharged about this debate, and you start with him or her, then your 10-minute meeting is going to be 10 hours.
Right. Well, and not just that, I think you hit on a really important point here. Thinking about the order people speak can be really critical when you have senior leaders in the room. And one of the things I advise senior leaders to typically do is to speak last. Because if you speak first, there's a really good chance you are going to influence a good portion of those people around that table, right? They're going to have to feel like they have to fall in line with you. I know Pixar Studios, they have this anti-hippo policy that they use in their meetings. And anti-hippo, it's a loose acronym for the highest paid person in the room, highest paid person in the room. So again, they talk about this, they're very aware of this, that they want to make sure in their meetings, everyone isn't deferring to who is the highest paid person in the room, that everybody has an equal voice. And I think if you're going to have constructive, kind debates, then that's really, really important.
I also, this is a point that's come up in past episodes, 2 years saying with, you know, the highest paid person in the room. I don't believe in treating people equally. I believe in treating people fairly.
I know you don't treat me equally, so I see.
No, because you're far better than I am. So that's why.
Yeah, right.
You know, you said today was opposite day.
Oh, right. Oh, I see what you're doing there. Nice. Nicely done.
Well played.
You're looking so handsome today, Sanjay, by the way.
What?
Yeah.
No, hold on. That's not. Now you made me, yes, thank you, Bazinga. I don't even remember what I was saying. You sucked it out of me.
You said you don't believe in treating people
fair
equal.
Versus equal.
Difference. Oh, for sure. Difference between fair and equal, right? This comes up all the time.
Fair versus equal. And it just because there are 10 people in the room, it doesn't mean we have 10 people that with 10% of the voice. If this is super passionate about with someone and they've done the research and other people and 6 of them don't care, then that 1 or 2 people who are super passionate about it should be taking the lead. And so I think that sometimes we forget that. We go, oh, well, there's 10 people, you know, there's 10 votes, we get 1 vote each. Well, sometimes that's a great solution. Other times it actually is to the detriment of the group. And that's why I think that to be a little controversial, people say, you know, it's your civic duty to vote. I don't think people should vote. I think informed voters should vote, and not just anyone should vote. Otherwise you end up with people in power who don't necessarily need to be in power because it's a popularity contest, it's because it's whatever. So I think it's important, in taking the politics out of it, bringing it to the workplace, that the informed decision maker or the informed people speak up, and the people who aren't informed, there's nothing wrong with saying, this is not my cup of tea, or here's what's important to me, here's my 2 cents of it, but I don't have enough to give you that.
Right.
So people can kind of step their ego aside and go, yeah, I suck at this, please.
Yeah.
Go for it.
For sure. For sure. Yeah, I buy that.
I got a
Absolutely.
good point.
I think there should be a little quiz before people go into the polling booth. You should be able to at the very least, match a photo to the people who are running. Like that should be the baseline, and then there should be
In
just
my
some.
in my booths here, we actually have this little it's like a plexiglass thing with a hole about yay big, and you put your arm in it, and they check if you have a pulse, and if you have a pulse, you can vote. So
Yeah, well,
it's
yeah,
almost the
that's
same thing.
right. Yeah. So another area we haven't talked about that I know this topic comes up from time to time is safety in the workplace, right? Where people ignore safety issues. They see a coworker behaving in an unsafe way, but again, they want to be nice. They're conflict averse, so they don't say anything. I think, and that's a great example, I think, of the difference between being kind and being nice. You are not being kind if you send your coworker home with less limbs than what they came into work with. So
Yeah, I mean, I think there's not really much to harp on that. I don't know if there's any controversy. Is if you see something, it's kind of your duty. Now, I guess where it becomes a balance situation is, when is it okay, and when are you overstepping your bounds, right? If I see someone at the Walmart yelling at their child, right, is it my duty, or is it okay? Is that healthy conflict to come up and go, it's clear to me you have some anger issues. I think you should seek some counseling before, letting it out on your child. Right. And obviously I'm saying it's very facetiously and very tongue in cheek, but where do we draw that line? And I guess based on our experiences, if we see unsafe practices, childhood, when I was a kid, no one wore helmets on their bikes, and it was no big deal. Now, all of a sudden, everyone wears helmets. And if you don't see someone doing that, like where do you draw the line? And I have no idea where it is. And I guess it's all based on your previous history, your experiences. But I don't know. What are your thoughts on that, Mr. Kerr?
Well, Mr. Sanjay, that's a big topic. I mean, you're talking about non-work situations. You're talking about, broader situations here, right? I think.
But not even. It could be work. It could, like, for example, if there's a factory situation and the guys typically, I don't need to worry about, I know we're supposed to wear steel-toed boots, but no one ever does it. Just because no one ever does it, that's not a good justification for you should not be doing it. Right. And so again, like then you become the wet blanket, and you become the pain in the ass, and you're the slug, or whatever language vernacular people use. But when is it okay and when is it not? Right? Like that's the.
Well, for me, in those situations, if it's a safety issue, then I think the onus always has to be on people to speak up when they see something, always. And that goes back to, is it being modeled by the management folks, by the supervisors, by the foreman? Are you building a culture where everyone understands the importance of that? And are you doing it still not in a jerk-like way? Are you doing it in a respectful way, maybe even with a little bit of humor? So you aren't coming across like a wet blanket or a broken record all the time, but you were at least genuinely expressing your concern about someone else's safety. And just think of how horrible anyone would feel if they knew they had a chance to speak up and they didn't. And that goes not just for safety, that goes for all sorts of ideas that get debated in our workplaces, right? Or you had the chance to say something and you didn't, and things go off the rail, and maybe days later, weeks later, months later, you're kicking yourself because you had a chance to speak up.
Earlier in diatribe that you just rambled there about, you said that's something about a broken record. I'm sorry, what is that? You're pretty old.
Oh yeah. What are you 24 years old? There's still records.
They say 24 hours in a day, 24 beers in a case. Coincidence? I think not.
I think not. No.
To that idea of speaking up. The other thing too is, as we know, people have a different degree of comfortableness in speaking up. Some people don't mind being confrontational, going, "Hey, idiot, put on your helmet." Other people would, absolutely not want to do that. And so the idea of how you speak up and offering metrics to a anonymous tip jar, right? A box, a feedback box, a website, an app. And then if you're using some of those more passive strategies, and I actually am a fan of them because people are more likely to say things, especially if there's anonymity. And so they're going to be more honest. But it's also really important that the organization itself then takes those things and acts on them and doesn't just, lip service, oh, yeah, whatever, throws in the back pocket or.
Absolutely.
I think
Or put a paper shredder on the other side of this.
I was going to say that was your
time, right? Yes. Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. I think that can be, but you have to relentlessly get back to people and communicate with people and make sure it's a two-way conversation. I still land on the, in a perfect world, I think if you have to have suggestion boxes, if you have to have anonymous ways of posting things, that still is a bit of a red flag that you haven't built. You're not there yet with your culture. You haven't built a high trust, psychologically safe culture yet.
Agreed. However, as you said, it could be a work in progress. It could be the training wheels to get there. And I'd rather see an organization offer that than offer nothing at all, rather than having swept under the rug and everyone becomes a doormat and just, oh yeah, I see it, but I don't want to look. The other thing too, I think that if we let a third party control it, it's not going to be nearly as powerful as an internally driven idea. What comes to mind is in the trucking industry, the Ministry of Transportation or the what do they call in the States? The DOT. They have mandated, oh, your worker can't work X number of hours. They can be only so many hours on the road and all that sort of, which I agree that it's important making sure people are well taken care of. But I think that when we get it third party driven, then we kind of roll our eyes and cross our arms, and it's more resistant than if it's we choose to do it. So as much as we can make things internal processes that we own, that we have giving our feedback to, they're going to be much more sustainable, and I think they're going to have a much higher percentage of buy-in.
Right. I think in an ideal world, yeah, it should come internally, but as we know, we don't live in an ideal world, and you do sometimes need those third parties to step in because companies are going to cut corners and get away with what they can, and so you do have to.
And to that point, exactly. When you have those companies aren't going to be around that long. I mean, the sustainability of them is in the balance. And I had no idea what that means. It could be 6 months, 6 years, 60 years. And sometimes it does take 60 years, but eventually, if you have unsustainable practices, you will become unsustainable. Mm-hmm. Mentally, financially, human resources wise, environmentally,
grammatically,
yeah.
Another area that we haven't touched on is customer service and putting up with jerk customer service. Says jerk customers. Yeah, that's what I'm trying to say.
What you said.
What I said. And I think that's a great distinction as well between being kind and being nice. And I myself love it when businesses are very honest and open about saying, if you're a jerk customer, we trust our employees because we've hired them correctly, we've trained them properly, we trust them. And if you're a jerk to our employees, we're not going to tolerate that. You're welcome to do business somewhere else. You are not our customer. And the whole concept of firing customers that are jerks, right? I love that. And I think that, again, is that divide between this is being kind to our employees, creating a kind, compassionate culture instead of trying to be nice to everybody, including the jerks that are potentially abusing our frontline employees.
Yeah, I agreed. First of all, I love that Ashley jerk custard. That is hilarious.
Jerk custard.
But I mean, we can't be afraid to get rid of the jerks. And I also want to point out the form of jerkiness can vary. It doesn't necessarily mean that they're yelling and cursing and swearing at the frontline employees. It could be much more subtle than that. It could be, I mean, there's obvious ones. They're stealing. They're but it could be they're bad mouthing. It could be having them around. Everyone else walks on eggshells, and their shoulders are up to their ears. And it's not only customers, but it could be employees. If you have that one employee who is a superstar in terms of execution and delivering and bottom line results, but everyone around them, feels the cone of ignorance And again, it's like this.
A cone of ignorance? Tell me about this.
Oh, you don't know the cone of ignorance? Oh, it's the funniest thing. Actually it's a Simpsons reference. So at one point they're showing Marge and Homer the scores, the grades of the kids that sit around Bart. And so it's this abyss. It's a 3D model.
He's like a black hole of knowledge, or
Exactly. Jerk custards and the cone of ignorance. These are the takeaways that we provide.
Valuable takeaways that people are getting here. These are phrases that are going to catch on and sweep the nation. Jerk custards.
Actually, Shelley, it's not ignorance, it's ignorant. You ignorant. So
I just want to hit the chat box here, Sanjay, quickly before we lose some of these, because Carol has a great point too there about it's not just about having suggestion boxes, also the different personalities, right, in our organizations, and some people feel more comfortable being honest. You can have the best environment, but they may have their own fear of being honest. Do you think that's something that we can hire for, Sanjay, and train and coach and mentor people?
Oh, I totally think so. I think you can always move the needle. I think though that given there are certain personalities, they're only going to move so much. Right. So if I don't know, if I can create a metric, say the keener gives 100 recommendations a year, right, and the quiet person gives 0. I think you might be able to coach the quiet person into 1 or 2 a year, but you're not going to coach them to 100 if that's not their personality. Yeah. So I think that we want to constantly coach people, and I think the best way we coach them is create the environment. And we create the environment by pointing it out, by leading by example, by celebrating the wins and the successes. I mean, stuff that we've talked about, whether it's
and by the way, and turning this into a habit too, right? I think one of the reasons people get so stressed out about having these conversations or giving or receiving feedback is that we do it so rarely. So then it becomes this big deal. But if you create a culture where it becomes the habit and becomes the norm, so it becomes second nature, it's no longer so scary. It's not this big deal because everyone's doing it all the time. And a follow-up question to that, Sanjay, when you said move the needle on that, was that a reference back to record players? Are you older than we think?
Look how clever I am. I don't know what's a record player.
Funny boy. I think that was. I think you slipped that in to show us.
Do you know what LP stands for?
No, but I'm sure you have some smart ass comment.
It's actually no. It stands for long play. That's what when you had an LP record, it's for long play. There you go. Yeah. I listened to. What did I have?
Is that how some clients refer to your talks?
LP long play. Yeah. I don't know. I thought it was large package.
I don't know. What? And Janet, thank you for this. Tired of customers thinking they have a right to be rude to. Yeah, and I. Do people think in the chat box, do you think this has gotten worse the last couple of years? People being rude to, I'm certainly hearing that incivility and rudeness has gotten worse.
I think the movement, what was that, late 80s, early 90s, that the customer is never wrong.
Yeah.
I think that actually did more harm than good.
Yeah. And you still hear it. I still hear it all the time from all the customers. They're wrong all the friggin' time.
The wrong customer is wrong.
The wrong customers, and yes, and we can't be everything to everyone. Yes. A lot of people seem to be saying yes. It's getting worse. It's getting worse. It's getting worse.
It's not getting well. It's getting worse in the sense that we have more ways of expressing it. I think it's always been there, but now when people can hide behind a Twitter account or an Instagram or whatever,
well, like Rose says, and emails and online social media. I mean, holy man, yeah,
right. But it was always there. People are just having it over a glass of wine on a Friday night, and they're complaining about their boss. And now someone will go do it anonymously, and we have more of it, or it seems that there's more of it. I think like people asking, someone had this conversation with someone last week about, is there just more crap and garbage going on in the world? And I go, I don't know if there is on a percentage basis. I mean, population increases, so yes, but I think we just hear about it more. And so when we hear about, I don't know, some in Toronto in the last few weeks, we've heard about a bunch of stupid kids doing stupid things on public transit, beating up transit workers and stabbing homeless people and like just stupid crap, which I think has always gone on. But we just hear about it now more because we're just everything there. We're in information overload. So it's unfortunate. And then what happens is the more it's reported, the more copycats we get. Yeah. So it gets into a pretty ugly perpetual cycle.
Perhaps, yes, yes.
Yeah, the Karen movement. I
Karen-
mean,
More phrases that are catching on here. Hashtag Karen
Exactly.
movement. Yeah, and Frederick, I would agree that the in-person stuff is getting worse. And I think, yeah, I mean, this is a whole side topic unto itself, but you know, the soul-sucking vortex that is social media is just
it
It's
also becomes a law of the diminishing returns, in the sense of, when we start off by saying, you know, I can what's the word when you bug someone online? When you
troll them.
Thank you. I control this person anonymously, and then all of a sudden you have a few too many in you, and then you troll them in person. Then you're like, I've trolled them in person, so well, now I'm gonna escalate that behavior, and I'm gonna tell off someone when I'm driving by. Then I'm gonna tell off my boss, and you get that law of diminishing returns. People like that high or that buzz of feeling right and powerful, and oh, look what I did, and I'm so tough, and then they go down a really, really slippery slope. So yeah.
For sure. And it's kind of, there's a parallel somewhat between road rage, right? People, we would never do that if we were actually face to face, but behind the anonymity of our cars, our vehicles, we all get a little road ragey from time to time because it feels a little safer. It reminds me of those videos. You can see so many of these videos with dogs, right? Where the dogs are just snarling, yelling at each other, swearing in dog language at each other, barking their heads off, and there's a fence in between them, and then somebody opens the gate, and then they're like, they're all wagging their tails, and they're all happy to see each other because the barrier is removed.
There you go.
I think social media does that for us.
Explains a lot of your behavior.
Yeah, I know, right? Hey, we have to wrap this up,
Oh,
my
geez.
friend.
All right, so wrap it up.
Although it is opposite day, so we could go for another, you know.
We're just
45
starting.
minutes. We're just starting now. We should do
I-
the. We should have done this backwards. Why
We
didn't
should
we
have
think of
said
that?
every word backwards.
Oh, we should have done this backwards.
All right, now all of a sudden people are like giving us all kinds of juicy bits here. But being respect for time, people can download the chat and look at those comments. We will wrap this thing up. I want to say thank you for being part of Every Other Wednesday. Hopefully we've shed some light on this idea of being nice isn't always being kind. So be kind to your workers, into the workplace, be kind to your family, internally, externally, socially, strangers, sing kumbaya with all.
Dogs.
With your dogs, their barking dogs, even if they take the fence down.
That's right.
We will be back together February 8th, I believe, is the date. And
I believe that is.
I believe it is the date.
Yes, and we're going to
so-
have some guest speakers coming up. Guest panelists coming up.
yes,
on
on
some
the 22nd
shows, so
of February, we do have someone scheduled.
Yep.
Which would be the one after February 8th. But
Right.
otherwise, in the meantime, we say to people, thank you very much for joining us. Have a great couple of weeks, and we will see you
Every Other Wednesday.
Woo, woo.
Thank you, Rose. Thank you, Ashley, for those comments. Thank you all for your comments, for your brilliance, your suggestions. Thanks for just being here. Thanks for being you. Make
Even
good
me?
life choices. And yes, Sanjay, make good life choices. You too. We'll see
All
you
right.
in 2 weeks.
Thank you, folks. Cheers.
Thanks all.